contributions and many reflections. It's an online briefing that we have been organizing with No Peace Without Justice. And I wish to welcome Mr. Talamanca, who's here with us, and he will be able to wrap up at the end of our meeting. So it's really a pleasure to meet with you, to meet with Mr. Talamanca and with all of you, trying to pool our forces to safeguard human rights. The title of today's meeting is very far-reaching and also ambitious. It is quite clearly a better title, Behind Bars When the Law is Turned into Repression, the cases of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. So this is what we will be discussing about. We will be discussing about how some repressive models are taking root in light of the lack of attention by parts of the international community that remain silent. So we will focus on different contexts where repression by the state, by governments and institutions, and also through law has become the dynamic according to which people are to be dealt with. This is a dynamic for people to face up to. So we will start with the contribution of three panelists that I'd like to thank very much because of their experience, because of the stories that they can narrate, repression they've suffered, and a very strong fight for rights. These are all very stories. And from the European Parliament, allow me to say that we wish to express a strong feeling of solidarity that has become also resolutions and public announcements. But first and foremost, we feel a deep a sense of gratitude for what you've been doing, for your courageous contribution, for your own experience and for the experience of those that are close to you. This is the strongest response that you may give to authoritarian regimes, especially in these days when Al-Sisi's Egypt, we see the celebration of the COP meeting. So I believe that all government representatives and also our prime minister, we should remind them that when they shake Mr. Al-Sisi's hand, that is a blood-stained hand. And when we talk about climate crisis, we should not simply refer to the cultural civil fight we must promote in order to get to a better model of development, but we should also make the voice heard of those who are not free. Or as an Italian national, I'd like to remind you of the story of Giulio Regeni and many others that have been victims of repression, and stories that are still to be clarified, and they have gone to the extreme of actually losing their lives. So it's a pleasure to be here to exchange opinions and experiences with you, because we will be discussing cases that prove how an arbitrary use of the judiciary and the laws altogether may become a tool for repression. Sometimes we silence justice. We actually violate the independence of justice to subjugate it to this repressive dynamic and make so that this action that takes place can be considered as something that the local public opinion or even international public opinion can tolerate, maybe because there is a feeling that there are no to face up to it. The European Parliament in many cases made its voice heard, and we will continue to do so. Today, we focus on Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. They are very different contexts, but we may say, and I believe that Mr. Talamanca will say it so at the end. So although they are different, nevertheless, there is a use of repression all across these three countries, and according to a philosophy that sees no separation of powers, and that the judiciary is used as a tool in order for people to be deprived of their freedom, that this cannot be accepted. It has to be fought against. And I'd like to say thank you to Jessica Kelly, who's a reporter, Ahmed Ahwani, who's a human rights defender in the United Arab Emirates, and Lina al-Hathloul, still in charge of monitoring the situation. We see that these three panelists will talk about their stories and the stories of those that are close to them. And if I may, I would like to ask you at the very beginning of your intervention that will, of course, refer to the context and to what we have been reporting together. But I would like to ask you to say in a nutshell your experience, your story, and what happened to you. So as I said at the beginning, thank you very much, because you have responded to what you have suffered and are suffering, a very strong, active action. So I'd like to start right away with Jessica Kelly, who's also a documentary director, and she deals with the Middle East. She's wife of Karim Ennarah, who's the director of Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights, and he's also a human rights defender. In 2020, he was in a beach resort when he was arrested and detained because he was charged with joining with a terrorist group, and he is still detained in a prison in Cairo. I'm sorry if I brutally summarize your story, Jessica, please forgive me, but I'd like you to start from this and provide us with your contribution. Thank you, Jessica.
Hello, Pierfrancesco, and thank you so much for having me. I'll just give a few extra details on Karim's case. So at the time of his arrest in 2020, Karim, who I had just got married to 2 months before, after many years of a long-distance relationship, due to the fact that he was so committed and passionate about his human rights work in Egypt. And Karim was the director of the criminal justice unit at EIPR. So he was working very much on the alarming surge in the use of the death penalty in Egypt, conditions inside prison, arbitrary arrest, all issues that had become very dangerous to tackle in Egypt. And there are many reasons that someone working in human rights in civil society in Egypt can be arrested. But one of the main triggers for his arrest was a meeting that EIPR held in their offices, which was initiated by the German embassy, but attended by 13 different countries, including the UK, Canada, France, Germany, Norway, Italy. So mostly ambassadors, but also deputy ambassadors. And a few days later, somebody from the office, the HR manager, was arrested. He was questioned and interrogated about the meeting. Then a couple of days later, while Karim was on holiday, he was arrested. And then a day after that, Gesa Abdul Razak, who was the director of EIPR at the time, was arrested as well. So 3 arrests in the space of a week, which was an unprecedented crackdown on EIPR. EIPR has never been, popular with the Egyptian regime, but they did manage to kind of operate in some kind of space where such a crackdown wouldn't be acceptable. Thanks to their prominence, there was huge international outcry at their arrests. And so as I began campaigning as Karim's wife, I was also joined by governments and a great deal of international support. And thanks to that, because in Egypt, as many of you will know, if you're arrested as a political prisoner, you're likely to spend months, if not years, in pretrial detention. But luckily for us, Karim and his colleagues were released after 2 weeks. I don't think that's what the Egyptian regime had in mind for Karim. I think they intended for him to be locked away for much longer. And as a result, him and his 2 colleagues have been punished with travel bans and asset freezes, and they still have the terrorism charges against them open. And it's difficult to talk about travel bans when there are so many political prisoners in Egypt. And as I'm sure you're all aware, such as Ali Abdel Fattah, who's currently on hunger strike and has also stopped drinking water. There are some such life-threatening cases in Egypt that are so urgent. And I think that it's really difficult to talk about these more invisible restrictions, but which also have a devastating impact on people's lives. And particularly when they are used against members of civil society and the very people that should be defending the rights of political prisoners. So as a result of the travel ban, me and Karim have been separated for the last 2 years. I'm able to visit him every 3 months or so when I can get time off work. But our plan of him moving to the UK and us living together has been thwarted. He's also unable to access money. Doesn't have a bank account anymore. So it's very difficult for him to find employment because he's locked out of the banking system. He currently still works at EIPR because it's likely the only place that he can be paid in cash and survive day to day. I'll just talk a little bit about the impact of these measures because it's, as I said, it's very difficult to talk about these measures which are less extreme and less life-threatening than prison, but they do have a devastating effect on people's lives and especially people's mental health. I've seen in Karim a real deterioration in how kind of positive he is and how he's able to think about any kind of future. And he's someone who always lived life to the very fullest and always fought for the rights of other people. And I'm kind of slowly seeing like his energy and his spirit being dampened by these repressive measures. Given the title of this discussion, I think it's also important to mention that all legal recourse has been attempted in their case. So travel bans don't have any legal framework governing them in Egypt. They are arbitrary. There's nothing, you can't appeal them under the law, and they can last for any length of time. Hossam Bahket, who's the current head of EIPR, has had a travel ban for 7 years. And in total from EIPR, there are 5 staff members who have travel bans. As with as far as asset freezes go, you are meant to be allowed to appeal asset freezes every 3 months, but in their case, they have not been able to do that. Their lawyers have gone through the usual process, but it's not been recognized. And so 2 years later, we're in a position where I don't see any improvement, and international pressure seems to be the only thing that can help us. And again, it's difficult to maintain that pressure and, you know, keep your case in the spotlight, especially when you're trying not to aggravate the government. I'm often told that, you know, I haven't created enough pressure for, you know, the British embassy to do X or Y. And I wonder why it's my job to do that, and why shouldn't they just be lobbying as hard as they can for Karim's release. And the specific context of his arrest, the fact that he was arrested and interrogated and charged with joining a terrorist organization as a result of this meeting with diplomats from all over Europe, is something that I think these countries really need to take responsibility for. Yeah, that was all I have to say, but happy to answer any questions.
Perfetto, grazie Jess Kelly, davvero.
Thank you very much, Jess Kelly. What you have narrated is quite clear. We remember now also the story of Patrick Zaki that I embrace. His is a very terrible personal experience, and certainly speaks for the many that also exist. So I'd like to pass on to Lina al-Hathloul, and I apologize for my pronunciation, but I'd like to hear your contribution. I'll just introduce you, and then it will be up to you to tell us about your story. You are the person in charge of communication for X for Human Rights, and you've always worked to free your sister, Loujain al-Hathloul. Loujain al-Hathloul is a Saudi Arabia activist for women's rights. She is a prominent social media protagonist. She is a political detainee, and she's been playing a very active role in the women's movement. She has also worked against the male domination in Saudi Arabia. She stayed in prison for 3 years. She was released on the 10th of February 2021. But even nowadays, she is the subject of a travel ban. Now the word to you, Mrs. Hathloul.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Nicolo, for organizing this, and thank you, Pierfrancesco, for the event. Well, actually, I am not as eloquent as Kelly, so I have prepared my speech that I will be reading. So good evening, everyone. I am Lina al-Hathloul. I'm a Saudi activist, and as you mentioned, sister of Loujain al-Hathloul. My sister Loujain, a prominent human rights defender, was arrested in 2018 for her peaceful activism for women's rights. She remained months in an unofficial prison, subjected to torture, and not even charged officially. She was in pre-trial detention for almost a year. Then her trial lasted 2 years, where sessions were indefinitely postponed without any legal justification. And finally, she was sentenced. She was sentenced as a terrorist, released from prison, and put on a travel ban. Not only is my sister on a travel ban, but my whole family has been collectively punished for Loujain's activism, and they are all forbidden from leaving the country as well, a sanction that is illegal even based on Saudi law. My sister and my family's case is just one among thousands of cases. Another individual currently held in detention without charge is Abdullah Jailan, who was forcibly arrested by state security forces on the 12th of May 2020 upon his return to Saudi Arabia from the United States. No arrest warrant or justification for his arrest was provided. Jailan had been vocal on Twitter through an anonymous account and advocated for fundamental freedoms in Saudi. During interrogation, he was subjected to torture, including electrocution, and he has been denied any contact with his family and the outside world. Jailan's arrest occurred amid a crackdown against young activists and bloggers in May and June 2021, who had been peacefully expressing their opinions online. They include Abdurrahman al-Sheikhi, Asma al-Sbei'i, Rina Abdelaziz, Yasmin al-Khfaili, Najwa Ahmed, and Lina Sharif, all of whom remain in prolonged detention more than a year after their arrests. Al-Sharif currently faces charges under the kingdom's counterterrorism law, but has not yet been brought to trial. Others have been held in extended detention for even longer, including human rights defender Mohammed al-Jadi, who, despite spending more than 4 years in detention since his arrest in May 2018, he has still not been charged or brought to court. Such practices are grave violations of international human rights standards and the kingdom's own laws. Under the law of criminal procedure, the public prosecutor can extend detention up to a maximum of 6 months, after which the detainee must be either released or referred to court. However, Article 19 of the counterterrorism law effectively removes the upper limit on pretrial custody for terrorism crimes, which, as Loujain's case illustrates, can be for activism charges as well. Other prisoners of conscience in Saudi Arabia who have been referred to court are continuing to face endlessly prolonged trials. This includes Salman al-Auda and Hassan Farhan al-Malki, both detained in September 2017, whose trials, in which the public prosecutor is calling for death sentences, have continued to drag on for unknown reasons. Most recently, on the 16th of October, the criminal court, the specialized criminal court, again postponed the hearing of al-Malki with no new date set. Dozens of other detainees in Saudi Arabia, including a number of minors, remain at risk of execution following grossly unfair trials, including al-Huwaiti members, Shadli, Atallah, and Ibrahim al-Huwaiti. In a worrying new development, over the past 2 months, the Saudi courts have handed down a number of unprecedentedly long prison sentences to individuals for exercising their right to freedom of speech. These include 34 and 45 years prison terms for women's rights activists Salma al-Shihab and Noura al-Qahtani. Many other sentences have been dramatically lengthened by the specialized criminal court on appeal, which this incentivizes individuals unjustly detained from appealing their wrongful convictions. This includes Isra al-Ghumghan from 8 to 13 years, and Mohammed al-Rabi'a, who was arrested with my sister Loujain and imprisoned based on the same charges. He's supposed to be released, but he is being retried. With the latest spate of ultra-long sentences, concern is growing that those yet to be sentenced or facing retrial may be facing similar harsh and unjust punishments. We therefore call on the international community to intensify efforts to press the Saudi Arabian authorities to release those currently detained in the kingdom for their peaceful exercise of freedom of speech, and to allow those on travel bans to travel freely and enjoy their basic rights. Thank you.
Grazie, mi pare
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lina, for your words and your comments. I believe that we are faced with the fact that the very tools that should allow us to safeguard and protect people from the point of view of fundamental and human rights are, on the contrary, used to actually carry out a harsh repression. So we are now facing authoritarian regimes that unfortunately the international community does not consider them as such, just consider as al-Sisi is being considered, and also the incredible things that we have been listening about. Saudi Arabia has been, there have been rumors or comments about a new renaissance. This is a repression that is based on a systemic repression of people, and it is not acceptable. So we will continue now on with your contributions, and I'd like to pass the floor to Ahmed al-Nuaimi, who's living currently in the United Kingdom, and he cannot go back to the United Arab Emirates. He's been banned ever since 2012, if I am correct, because if he would do that, he could be detained upon arrival. So I believe that Mr. al-Nuaimi will be talking about a story that regards a family situation that is very complex due to the fact that his son has been forbidden from travel, and this is in retaliation of his father's activism. So this is another yet kind of context and other tools used to persecute a human rights defender. Thank you. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me for today's conference, and thanks Nicola for organize this meeting, which is very important for us to tell you about the situation in the UAE. And I think it's a similar situation as al-Hathloul mentioned in Saudi Arabia, and what even Jessica talked about Egypt. We have the same region, and we have unfortunately the very close regime in their actions against the people who call for the democracy or for their freedom. First of all, to present myself, I'm Ahmed al-Nuaimi. I'm an Emirati activist, and actually I'm one of the people who gets the sentence from the case which calls Emirati 94, and I get 15 years sentence. And then actually they added 15 more. I don't know why, but they every while they add some years for me and for the other activists outside. I'm the brother of one of the detainees. His name is Khalid al-Nuaimi. He's my old brother. He's almost 70 years old now. And he actually finished his sentence, but he's still in the prison. Today, I'm going to tell you about the situation today after 10 years of when that problem started, when a group of people, of activist people in the United Arab Emirates called for democracy and for freedom of speech. They sent petition for the president of the United Arab Emirates But unfortunately, the reaction from the government was illegal, and it's very aggressive. This reaction to take all those people to prison, and we have to understand that wasn't actually under the law or legal prison, and they took them for unknown place for the secret prisons, and it took more than a year in this situation until the people find out how they could reach them, and they had no rights in that presence. Today, actually, it's been 10 years, and those people do not take even their, some of their rights. And if we talk about, today we are talking that most of those prisoners, actually, they completed their sentences, but they are still in the prison. Why? And what the government do in this case? They created a new version of a prison. They call it al-munasaha, and al-munasaha mean counseling centers in the prison, where they send those people who complete their sentence to extend their sentence, and it's not under the law. Actually, they can extend it for endless time. There is no problem to be there for a year or for 10 years or nothing. There is no limit for that time. And most of the prisoners who actually they completed, and I can say now all of them who completed, and they are more than 40, who completed their sentences, they are there, and they don't know when they will leave the prison. So it is very important to understand that everything comes from the state security. And this when we talk about the jail, which is called a Repression jail, it's under the state security, and the state security has no law, and they are not under the law, and they can do anything. They can take any person from the street, from the office, from their house, without any legal permission. They do whatever they want. So they design even the law to not actually have any barriers to do anything in the United Arab Emirates. And that's what happens, especially for the activists. The last one is Ahmed Mansoor. As you know him, he's a very active person, and he is now in jail, and the sentence that he gets is 10 years. And we know after that they will take him to this center to extend his staying in the prison. This is the situation now for the prisoner, but since the pandemic, even visiting the prisoners is not allowed. It's banned. No one can see them. No one can meet them. They just can call, and most of them actually, they disappear for months, and no one knows what is their situation. The other thing, this is the suffer of the prisoners, but as al-Hathloul said about what happened for their relatives, the prisoners' relative, they actually suffer. In the United Arab Emirates, actually, you can be banned from travel. You can be banned from job. You can sometimes you can't renew your cards, your ID, your passport, because you are related to one of the prisoners. And this is actually extended more and more, and the people of those prisoners, they are suffered a lot because of that. My family suffered a lot. I'm talking about my family and my brother's family. I couldn't, first of all, I couldn't take my family from the United Arab Emirates until we found a way to get them out. But unfortunately, I couldn't bring my disabled son. And last year he passed away after 10 years of being away from me. And they actually banned him from travel, and that's how the people actually suffer in the United Arab Emirates. We call now everyone who can actually call for freedom for those people to move forward and talk to this government to give those people their freedom and to release those detainees, especially people who ended their sentences. Thank you very much again, and thank you for having your time today. Thanks a lot.
In realtà sono ovviamente io che ringrazio voi.
But it's I that must thank you, because your stories are quite important for all of us. You actually you bear witness to true courage that I hope will motivate institutions and individuals also within Europe, because we need to strengthen our action at the public level as to human rights and democracy, not only in Europe, but also outside Europe. I believe that your stories, your willingness to continue to fight are certainly exemplary, and they bear certainly witness to what we should incorporate in our institutions and translate into an actual political action. This is why I was mentioning what we have been doing within the European Parliament. So it's most important that we continue to exchange information and to support and uphold you that are fighting for human rights. Our institutions must actually take a quantum leap, and I'm sure that in this respect, we will enjoy the contribution of our true host, because our true host is no peace without justice, and therefore, I'd like to pass the floor to Mr. Nicola Figa-Talamanca, who will help us wrap up these reflections that will in turn strengthen our action in favor of the safeguarding and protection of human rights. Europe and the European Parliament has the responsibility of lighting, of actually shedding a light and keeping hopes alive. Thank you. Now over to you, Nicola. Thank you, Francesco. Thank you very much to our guests.
And we have a little bit of time, which instead of filling time myself, I thought maybe I will take the liberty, if Pierfrancesco allows, to throw back a couple of questions to our panelists.
Perfect.
There's one thing that seems to be a recurring theme, which is you were variously called upon, unwillingly, to become activists and to call for the freedom of others. And one of the things that Jessica said that was particularly striking, but I know it's also Lina's experience, is that often you were advised not to make too much noise. And you were told let the governments do their job. You know, we are working on your behalf. Don't make noise. You're making it harder. You chose to continue to make noise. It's a hard choice. And I wanted to ask you, I know it's a difficult one also for Ahmed, but ask you, what is your message to other brothers, sisters, wives, husbands, and parents, when the advice you receive from institutions is be quiet because it will be easier for you, and it's the same message you also get from the regimes. So how do you make that leap of faith in which you decide that it's better to speak out? And we don't have a lot of time, but I thought this would be very interesting for our listeners to hear from you. And I don't want to give any particular order. I see Lina has raised her hand.
Yes, I can start maybe. Well, thank you for this question. Okay, I think it's important to put things into context also. So when my sister was arrested, it was exactly the same moment where MBS, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, was discovered. Basically, he was applauded. He had his international tour. And, you know, it's difficult to really know what is going on. So you maybe have to a bit understand the situation, because screaming in that context wouldn't have been heard anyway. And then when things got really scary in the country, where there were waves of arrests that we have never seen before, of, you know, even royals, even the Ritz-Carlton, hotel being full of businessmen and princes being arrested and tortured. That's when we realized that, okay, there's something really going on, and we won't be able to communicate or to deal with the Saudi government like we used to. Again, what I'm saying is that Saudi Arabia, I mean, Loujain has been arrested many times during different eras, and her story, I think, illustrates also the change of regimes and how the Saudi government used to deal with its people. Back in 2014, of course, Saudi Arabia has never been a democracy, and of course, repression has always been there. But at least there were ways of communicating with the government. There were ways where there were counterpowers within the government. You know, you would see one part of the royal family, you would see some institutions that would at least answer you. Since Mohammed bin Salman came to power, there's just no way to be heard from the government. There is no answer. You don't even know who to reach. So that's why we started speaking up, and we said, okay, the only way we can, raise the issue and seek justice is for the international community to be with us and to hear us. And that's why we started, speaking up more and more. And that's why I tell now Saudis, the families of Saudi detainees, that there is no other way, unfortunately, now. Everything is locked in the country. So if you believe that, like maybe years ago, you would be able to do things privately within your own government, within the own, ways or avenues that are available in the country, it's not possible anymore. And this is why it's important to reach out to the diaspora outside and to tell your story and to raise the cases within the international community. So again, I don't want to be like a hardcore a screamer, because sometimes in some contexts it's not the best way, but now in Saudi it is the only way. And that's why I'm convinced, because of my personal experience and because now I work with al-Qist, it is the only thing that saves people in prisons. The government lacks legitimacy, and the only way for him to be stable, it's his image. And so as long as the image is broken, then they try to fix some things. So again, yeah, I invite all the families of detainees to please speak up, please reach to us, and just having the names out there is really important. Another thing I just want to add is to Western politicians. We've said it many times that we know the situation better than anyone else, and we want to be heard. I mean, I think that, even, for example, the Biden's visit, we did warn on everything that would happen if Biden goes and doesn't have clear benchmarks or conditions on what is going on in the country. Afterwards, this is exactly what we warned happened. There is more repression, and MBS feels emboldened that he doesn't even respect his own promises and engagements when it comes to oil with the Biden administration. So what I'm saying is that please listen to us. We know the situation, and when we say that it's important for names of detainees to be public, to have public statements about detainees, about human rights defenders, and that it won't harm them, it will help them, listen to us and please do it. And this is my message.
Thanks, Lina. I don't have too much more to add. You've got probably a lot more experience on this than me, but when Karim was arrested, there wasn't really a choice between going public or not, just because the arrests were already so public. Kind of my character was definitely to go public, and I didn't think that we'd get any results if we weren't. But the question became like a bit more complicated when he was released, and we were told, we did have an interlocutor at the time, we were told that if you just stay quiet and stop doing all the media, he'll be able to travel, he'll be with you by Christmas, and yeah, just, like naughty schoolgirl behave, and it will all be resolved. And I did that for a while, I did that for 4 months probably. And then eventually you realize that they're just doing that to shut you up, and it doesn't cost them anything to have these restrictions against your loved one. It doesn't cost them anything to have people in prison. And it really, I think it really is only by raising your case that it becomes, I kind of feel like you have to get the balance right. You have to be like a constant annoyance that isn't perceived as a huge existential threat, and that is more, something that, the cost of them keeping you is worse than if they were to let you go. And I obviously haven't achieved that balance quite right yet, because our case isn't solved, but it's really, really difficult. And, once you do decide to be public, you then have to decide, like, what type of media am I going to do? Like, what type of things am I going to say? Am I going to criticize the government directly, or am I just going to call on the Western governments to do more? So it is really complicated, but I've met lots of people who have had loved ones in prison for years and years and were silent for years and have now decided to speak out. And I think just like on a personal level, it's really hard to kind of wake up in the morning, go to sleep at night, when you're not doing anything. Even if you're doing something that might not be working, at least you kind of know that you're trying, and that gives you some respite.
And I will go a little bit for emotional way to say that simply, actually, it's the time to show whom you love your love. When you speak out and when you speak loud about their suffering and how you can help them as much as you can. I know it's our governments, actually, they are very aggressive. They threat everyone who talk about or try to show the right things happen behind their facade, but they try actually to hide all of that, and you come and give the truth, it's harm them. But they have to understand those people have people who love them, and we have to show that as much as we can. I don't want actually to blame anyone who is quiet, but we have to do our effort. And I can give an example. of that Hussein al-Najjar. Hussein al-Najjar has a son whose name is Osama. He actually went to the prison after doing his surgery. They took him from the hospital to the prison. Why? Because he tweeted about his father. He talked about his father and how he was suffering in the prison. So he gave that sacrifice, and he actually sacrificed a lot for that. And he spent 3 years in the prison because of just tweeting for his father. But he showed his father how he loves him, and he speak loud until even the United Nations talk about him. Even some of the parliaments in the world, they talk about Osama himself, how he sacrificed because he was talking about his father. We have to do our best. That's it.
Thank you for that. It's really important that you, as Pierfrancesco said, you embody the courage of saying no, and the courage of raising your voice. I think Pierfrancesco at the beginning.
We don't hear you. Nicola,
obviously it had to happen just as I was speaking. But no, I think Pierfrancesco mentioned, I mean, most of the things that bring together, in particular, the practices that of postponing hearings so as to keep people in pretrial detention indefinitely, as we saw, as Jessica attested to, and then most disheartening when those harsh and unjustified sentences are completed. As Ahmed mentioned, people are still being kept in prison, and even when they are ultimately released, they are still subject to another type of prison, which is putting prisoners in their own country. So not in prison, but not free. We have 6 minutes. Why do they do it? What is the objective? Is it purely for punishment? Is there a society plan? Is there what is your idea about why? I mean, is it simply dog-headed against individuals? Is it like, you know, I want to hurt this person? Is it, or is there a plan? What is the plan? Lina, you raise your hand.
Well, I'll be clear about the reason, or at least what we think is the reason. Our regimes lack legitimacy. You know, if they weren't scared about their people, they wouldn't be acting like this. If they were chosen by us, they would know that you know, they wouldn't be so vulnerable to a word. They know that anything could put them down. So, you know, they start from the very basic things, which are like women demanding their right to drive, and making sure that no one goes further than this. So they torture them, and they make sure that people know about this torture. So basically, it's the fact that our governments, our regimes lack legitimacy. They know that their people they have not chosen them. And that if they were about to speak or were about to choose, it's not them they would be choosing. So they're stopping everything from the beginning, and they're making sure that everyone is scared to speak, because they know that you know, they're not in the right place, basically.
Anybody else?
I totally agree with Lina, and I said that it is actually they build the model, which is actually it's suitable with all the regime around. They build this model just to show all the people. They are scared of people. They are scared that the people can change in the future, and they want to threat all the people not to speak loud about their needs, even their needs. Just be quiet. Few months ago, in UAE, they actually closed the newspaper and they fired all the people because they talk about the price of the gas, the oil. It is something doesn't make sense to be aggressive that much, but it shows us how they aggressive to show the people that if you go after the red line that we draw, the government draw, you're gonna be punished, and it won't be like any punishment. When we see people that they spend even their sentences, which comes from the government actually who give these sentences, and they extend it, and they don't even respect their decision. It shows us how actually they want to show the people that we are not mercy, we are really aggressive, don't come to this line.
I think that's all we almost have time for, unless Jessica, you have anything that you want to add?
Not really. I was going to say that I'm probably not the best person to comment on why Egypt does it, but I think ultimately it comes from fear and paranoia. And yeah, we wish that they would relax just even a tiny bit.
All right, Pierfrancesco, back over to you for the last minute of our seminar, and thank you again to Honorable Majorino for having hosted us. Hopefully, also in person at the Parliament soon. And I yield back the chair to Pierfrancesco Majorino with my thanks.
Io riparto dalle considerazioni che faceva.
Well, I have to go back to what Jessica Kelly said just a few moments ago when she spoke about paranoia. Well, I believe that this could be applied to all three countries. This paranoia grows exactly when the international community is unable to develop the necessary constant pressure to be exerted on these governments. And I'm very convinced of this, because what we have done so far has been just but not sufficient. We have to show these regimes that we go by very consistent behaviors. And I do hope that the images of national and international institutions, the images of representatives we see in Egypt these days will no longer be the same in the future, because we need to be very firm and very strict, exactly as you said here today. So thank you very much, and thanks to No Peace Without Justice, with which we will continue to fight for human rights.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.